in the COVID relief bill, there was $5 billion, I believe, that was set aside.
Half of the $10.5 billion that was set aside for farmers went to black farmers.
Yeah, so $10.5 billion set aside for farmers. $5 billion were set aside to make up for literally decades of action by the U.S. government via the USDA that drove black people out of farming. We know this because of investigations that were done across the board, even internal ones, that some of which led to a settlement, a major lawsuit settlement. Not hard to find USDA. And so $5 billion are set aside. How would you react to this if you're a conservative? Well, of course, you'd come out and say, I don't know, this is like Obama's, phone/fund, which was started during George W. Bush's era, or what. Here's how Steven Crowder responds. It's
like not even funny.
It's not, I mean, it's
not even funny to mock. Like, it's disturbing.
It's disturbing. Like, this guy's full on, like, this is something you'd imagine you would have seen like 40, 50 years ago. This is full on step and fetch it. I mean, this is unbelievable.
I don't know where you find this many farmers of color, but they did. And $5.2 billion are being allocated exclusively for colored farmers. Farmers of color, roll the tape.
We begin today's show looking at a major provision in President Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill that aims to address decades of discrimination against Black, Hispanic, Native American, and Asian American farmers who've historically been excluded from government agricultural programs. The American Rescue Plan sets aside $10.4 billion for agriculture support.
Wait, I'm sorry.
That guy needs receipts on that?
I have stats right here if you want it. Like, I read this. So white farm. Go on, Sam.
No, go ahead. You read your stats.
No, it's just like, so basically loans that were given by the Department of Agriculture and the federal government, let alone the subsidized land, heavily subsidized land that went to farmers throughout the country, so heavily favored white people that in 1910, Black farmers owned 14% of farmland. White farmers now own 98% of farmland. Black farmers have lost 12 million acres of farmland since 1950, and there are only 45,000 Black farmers out of 3.4 million farmers total. And that was basically because the federal government decided to systemically discriminate against Black farmers in terms of federal loans and the land that was given to them, because farming subsidies basically keep small farms afloat. I mean, they're largely socialized in the way that our government funds them. So there's your receipts, Steven Crowder.
Continue.
And allocates about half the funds to farmers of color who are, quote, subjected to racial or ethnic prejudice because of their identity as members of a group, unquote. The U.S. Commission on Civil Rights confirmed as long ago as 1965 the U.S. Department of Agriculture discriminated against Black farmers, but little was done to address the problem.
100 years ago?
Yeah, most happy about the new policy, these people. So, yeah. I'm gonna buy a plow, man.
I'm gonna plant that corn.
Go get a John Deere. Barack Obama, mother, I'm the president of plowing that ass.
You.
I thought the last thing they would want to do is be farmers. Wasn't that a big problem for hundreds of years?
Yeah.
Isn't that why Arsenio Hall called himself the urban man's Johnny Carson?
I think so.
Yeah, I don't know. Are people lining up out in the middle of cornfield, Iowa for new dunks?
How would you prove this, by the way? Like, how would you prove that you've been discriminated
against? You don't
against?
have to. You just
Well, I didn't get that loan. Sir, you had no credit. Well, that should not have stopped me from getting the loan.
I planted a Hennessy tree, but it's not growing.
Well, technically it did grow, but that shit ain't XO.
I put it in the ground.
I planted a VSOP XO tree. I'm getting in some niche esoteric cognac humor, motherfucker.
Don't white people just go to their neighborhoods and build urban farms and ruin their communities? Isn't that what
That's
how it works?
In Detroit. Like, turns out the soil content, there's a high level of meth.
Yeah, crazy. Whoa.
Wow, I didn't know.
That and teeth. Just random teeth littered everywhere.
And by the way,
pain in my arugula.
I mean, it's almost hard to absorb.
So how long has he been practicing that minstrel voice, right? Like he just wishes he had the opportunity to put blackface on and do that on his show, but then he'd be canceled. He seems to have been practicing that.
I don't watch a lot of Steven Crowder. Why was he wearing the kind of leather like
that's his
police
holster.
detective strap?
He has a holster. He keeps a gun on during the whole time.
Is he going to unload on his staff when if they don't practice their minstrel voices in time?
Important for him to dress like an 1860s sheriff.
It is that was just so full on racist. Like it's almost like a parody of a racist show.
It's just a little antiquated, I think, Sam. I think you said it's
that's
like,
what I mean.
You know, I'm surprised he didn't say they were going to grow the crop for like 40 ounces or something. It's just a little old.
He did.
He said Hennessy.
He
said Hennessy, so he updated it a little bit.
I mean, I guess it just strikes me as like the kind of humor you get like from the 80s, maybe late 90s, late 90s racism around when Joanna Man was coming out and like the white chicks and stuff.
Yeah.
2021, it's just, there are funnier racisms out there. No offense.
Honestly,
people are a little bit more clever now.
I think that is the thing, is that like his racism is so hack. It's like, that's what I mean. It's like a parody of a racist show. It's so racist and so lame that it almost looks like it's mocking itself, but it's not.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the easiest way I feel to like carve out a niche audience now. If you're not like actually funny enough to make jokes, which I will say I'm not. It's just to, stake out a semi-controversial opinion that people aren't taking anymore in the mainstream. And no matter how sloppily you do it, you're basically one of the only people doing it. And then it just becomes, part of this long-standing ecosystem of like the Republican and far-right complexes, A, victimology, and then B, like their incredible insecurity about not being funny. And it's just like, yeah, of course, they'll support people like this who just like make the illusion of jokes because A, it harkens back to a time when I guess they were, people were making jokes like this, probably funnier still, but also it gets them, allows them to, make the argument that the right is getting funny again. The right has like, soldiers in the meme war, and they are very, very insecure about the fact that they're not funny. And it just speaks to like, yeah, we know on the left, on the center, anyone with the objective analysis of reality knows the right controls everything. Conservatism, neoconservatism, neoliberalism is the law of the land here. But what they don't like is that there aren't that many like Republican movie actors. They don't like the fact that like, James Woods isn't in movies anymore. Like, and that's what they just kind of like harp on so much. So they love guys like this, but it doesn't do service to comedy, I think.
And he said 100 years ago. This needs to be seen in the context of the Secretary of Agriculture Vilsack having issues with black farmers going back to when he was under Obama, saying this is all resolved, but like massive issues with disproportionate money going in USDA loans and microloans.
Well, that's a silly. I'm sorry, that's silly because there are farms that are over 100 years old. There are people who are over 100 years old. It's kind of like he didn't even say 500 years old, but they're like there are certainly generational farms.
Oh my
Absolutely,
gosh.
yes.
Oh my
That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. This farm has been in my family for 5 generations. I've seen Smallville.
That's
I
the
know
whole
someone
mythology.
who has been farming the same piece of property, someone in his family, and he is one of them who's been farming that since the early 1800s. I mean, this happens all the time.
But that's the whole trope that Republicans want to say about their voters. They just don't want black people to be included in it. And they hadn't been for decades because of...
But there's, I mean, I know that there are Crowder fans who are going to be watching this video who are going like, they're not even critiquing it. Like, they're not even explaining where it's racist. And just like honestly, the easy explanation for you people who don't get why this is racist is implication, well, I mean, as aside from like sort of making up these black voices and mocking them in the context but black people can be farmers. Black people have been farmers since the beginning of this country, and they continue through this. And they were farmers. We just came up in our interview today about the thousands of black farmers who were incredibly successful in the what was then the Northwest territories of the country, back when Ohio and that area was considered the Northwest territories. And their success was attacked head on by whites and our government, who basically outlawed their success. I mean, more or less, that's a broad stroke, but what's the name of the interview that we did on that a couple of years ago? Someone who's written a book on that. I mean, it's sort of more
well, basically
history
the two farming crises in the 20th century just redistributed farming wealth to white farmers.
And the ignorance that's associated with the idea that we're going to take this parody of a black person and show how ridiculous it is that they would be farmers, that if there would be meth on their soil, and that meth problem, I got some bad news for you folks, but it's a white problem.
Everyone knows American soil is full of like arsenic and poison, not meth.
Right, indeed.
But I mean, from my perspective, it's just like, this is one of those things that people complain about when they want to complain about, affirmative action or like reverse discrimination or whatever. Same with like the classic trope of the Mexicans are stealing our jobs, etc. Where it's just like, do you really want a loan to start a farm? Like, is that something Steven Crowder wants to do? Like, does he want a loan to start a farm that's being taken away by some theoretical black farmer? Is that like what's happening here? Or is this just, hypothetical where these black farmers don't deserve to, be able to work in an incredibly hard breaking industry, because they want to, because it might theoretically impact the ability of another theoretical white farmer who deserves a loan or something? It's all very vague and abstract. It's like a problem no one really has in terms, because most people don't want to be farmers. Like, most people aren't looking for a farm loan. There's a handful of people who do want it. And a lot of those people, rather, a decent portion of them are black, and they've been historically denied it. And so, like, for someone who doesn't want a farm to be like super invested in black farmers getting some kind of preferential treatment just comes across as incredibly odd. It's an odd albatross to have, unless you just really don't want black people to have anything.
Well, it's myopic too, because it's like, just quickly, Sam, it's $5 billion in this massive COVID relief bill. It's a drop in the bucket, but this is what they choose to focus on.
The book Kid Tested Politic Bureau approved has reminded me, the book is The Bone and Sinew of the Land, America's Forgotten Struggle for Equality. It was by Anna Lisa Cox, and we'll find out when she was on the program. I think
Sam, you talk about comedy and how you have trouble if the punchline isn't sort of can't be squared with reality, right? You familiar with what I'm talking about? So there's this moment in that clip where the guy says, systemic racism, how would you even prove that? And first of all, MFer, you're the producer. Do some work and try to figure out if anyone's done anything about like how these loans have been apportioned. But then the guy's like, there's a moment where you can see the anxiety of the guys. Like, don't get in the way of our racist riff here. You couldn't prove it, of course. And then they go to talking about Hennessy trees.
It was August 27th, 2018. We did that book. Fascinating story. I mean, really fascinating story. People should check that out.